Well, hello everybody and welcome to Desktop Publishing Do's and Don'ts. And we've got a little tick for when it's right and a little cross for when it's wrong. And this has been written and prepared on behalf of Warwickshire and Solihull W. Carver by J Design, and that is me. My name is Jonathan Firth. I'm a creative professional with more than 25 years experience making ideas, words and pictures leap off the page, shelf or screen to build brands, tell stories and sell stuff. Now I have to admit it's a little bit more than 25 years. I've been using that line for about 5 or 6 now, probably even more than that. Now, so as we say, this is a talk about how to get the best out of your desktop publishing to try and achieve professional levels of quality and communication. And we're going to reward people with the big tick when this is right. So this talk is not going to talk about software and how to use your software. It's talking about the broader principles of design that have been around since I began in my career, where we drew the creative with marker pens and they made camera-ready artwork mechanically before anything digital. So just a little bit more about me. I went freelance in 2001, so I've been doing it for nearly 25 years. And before that, I was an art director and senior creative at various agencies in the Midlands. And the clients I worked for included Adobe. I was lead creative on Adobe Shop magazine, which was a retail magazine that went out to designers and design studios 3 times a year across Europe in 8 languages. And I also produced the original launch materials for InDesign, which has now become the industry standard page making software. So that's me. In my free time, I do a lot of work for my local drama group. I've been providing all the publicity posters and programs for shows since 2000, so I've probably done about up to 50 shows promoted. And I also have written and illustrated 2 children's books, and I'm halfway through my 3rd. So hopefully this talk will be interesting. I'll bring my experience to you. I'm not the only designer, other designers are available, but this is sort of my view of what to do. Now, imagine, if you will, a pretty little village of Flovey by water, nestled by the riverside somewhere in Warwickshire, as picturesque as it is make-believe. Now, not all is well in Flovey by water. Their village hall and community centre can only be reached by steep steps, so they're trying to raise money to improve access for people in the community. And to do that, they're going to have a coffee morning. Now, so to promote their coffee morning, they're going to need to create a poster and a flyer. And a flyer is just a small poster that you hand out. Basically, the design is the same. So what you need to do, designing a poster or flyer is a little bit like telling a story. And like all good stories, it has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And the beginning is always a headline. It doesn't have to be bold, but it does have to be big, the biggest type on the page. Now, there are 2 kinds of headline. The first kind of headline is what I refer to as a passive headline. It literally states what the event is and does little more. It's clear, it's direct, and the reader can take it or leave it. But we can do better than that. The second type of headline is what I call an active headline, and it engages the reader by having a question or a tease, or with professional work, it's usually a benefit-led headline. It talks about the benefit of buying the product rather than what the product actually is. So we're starting off with this headline, Fancy a Coffee. Now, this isn't a bold headline. This is a regular weight. Sometimes if you use a bold headline in bold or a black weight, it's a little bit shouty, and we're trying to be friendly here. But also, at this size, the regular weight has some nice features which make it quite distinctive. Particularly in this font, it's got ligatures for the double F in coffee, which are quite nice. Now, I've set this with very tight leading, which means it's got negative line spacing. Now, leading is a term that comes from the days of hot metal type, when the compositor would literally put a slither of lead between the rows of characters to make more space between the lines. So this is actually impossible because it's got negative leading, which they couldn't possibly do in those days. What you have to be careful when doing that, it makes a nice tight block of type, but you need to be careful that your ascenders and your descenders don't clash. Now here, the ascenders on the F and the descender of the Y actually interact quite nicely and add a dynamic, which is quite a nice thing to have in a headline. Now, if you start with a active headline, the next thing you need to do is to answer the question or give the details that would have been in the passive headline that tells you what the event is. And this is the middle part of the story. Now here we've done it in a bold subhead, and it's saying, come to our charity morning and help raise funds for our community centre. So the rest of the middle is the text, and this gives a little bit of information about what the event is, what you're going to do, what people can do when they're there. So we're talking about everyone's welcome to come along and enjoy a tea or coffee and a slice of homemade cake, and all for £1.50. The money we raise will help us make essential improvements to make our community centre more accessible to those who need it most. And we've had a little bit more information as well. Parents with small children and dogs are welcome too. Quite what you do if you've got a large dog, I don't know. The next part, which is the ending, is also very important because it gives you the location of the event, the venue, and the date and time. And also, as an added courtesy, it's not essential here, we've added a call to action and a phone number. If you're selling tickets or if you require people to book, it's important that you put contact details there. But here, it is just a courtesy if people want to know more information, like, can I bring my large dog, for example? Finally, you add your logo. Now this is important because it brands the page, it tells people who you are, and it reassures them of your credentials. Now, a lot of people think the logo is the most important thing and put it at the top. It isn't really the most important thing. We're not really interested in where this is, we're interested in the coffee and the cake. Now, some multinationals and large companies will put a logo at the top. You notice on any NHS leaflet, it's always got NHS in the top right-hand corner. It sort of brands the page and endorses the document, but it's not necessary for the communication that we're trying to achieve here. So, we look at our poster. We've got a nice big headline. The text is nice and clear. There's plenty of space around the blocks of type, so you can navigate it easily and quickly. So if this is pinned up in your village hall, you can walk past and just glance at it, and you can see straight away, coffee morning, Saturday the 8th of March at Flovey Village Hall. You perhaps don't need to read anything else. That's enough for you. So we're going to give it a tick, because it's actually working as a decent poster. Now, if you have black and white printing and not access to colour, you can make it a bit more interesting by using greys for the headlines and the graphics, but you must never use grey for your body copy because the printer will put a dot on it to make it grey. It'll break down the serifs and it'll make it difficult to read. And if you're using it on a pale coloured background, it makes it even more hard to read. And that's the other thing you can do with a black and white poster. You can add colour by using coloured paper, but I would be careful to only use pastel colours that will let you read the grey and the black. If you use darker colours, just make sure everything is black so that it will stand out. So that is a black and white poster. But of course, nowadays there's plenty of colour printers, and colour works far better at catching the eye. So for our next slide, we're going to make a coloured poster. Now, I would choose a mid-colour, something that white and black would work on equally well. So I've used a pale blue. Now, you'll notice it's got a white border. Some printers don't print edge to edge, and rather than letting the printer decide what edges it's going to leave you of white, which sometimes are uneven and not very nice, do it yourself and make sure that you've controlled the width of it to make it a nice, centred, balanced look and feel to it. White borders are quite attractive because they make your work stand out when it's put on a coloured notice board, or if it's left, the flyers are left out on a table. It frames the work and it makes it stand out. Don't have to do it, but it's quite nice to do it. And also if you've got colour, you can do a coloured border rather than a white one. So here we put a nice pale blue, and we're using a nice white headline, same size as before, we've just done it in white. So it looks well with the border and creates a nice unified look and feel. So we then add our subhead that answers the question or gives more information on the question. And we've done it in a bright blue here, stands out quite nicely, and we're starting to get quite a nice visual contrast, which is eye-catching, and it helps you navigate. So adding the text, we've done this before, it's still in black, you still need to keep it black really to make it legible. And then finally, then we put our call to action, i.e. where and when we're going to have the event, but we've got the added benefit now of having white, so we can actually bring out the call to action and the phone number in white to give it a bit more emphasis. Now, you don't have to emphasise the phone number, it might not be the most important thing, so you might want to do the date or the location either. And then finally, we add our logo. Now, we've got a problem here, because does our logo work on a pale blue background? Probably not. Now, some softwares support transparent backgrounds, so if you drop your logo onto your page, it will let the background show through. Others don't and make it have a white background, and often looks a bit awkward and ugly, and you can improve it by actually putting your own white panel around it to give it a bit of space, but it still looks like it's a bit of an add-on and an afterthought. So what I would suggest you do is you can bring the blue background up and have a white logo panel. It integrates well with the border, and it means when you drop your logo on, it looks like it's meant to be there. It also has the advantages if you're doing work for a charity and there's legal requirements of putting a charity number, or you've got space either side where you can put it in small print. So there we have a type-based coloured poster, and again, the navigation is easy because the colour changes, and we can give that a tick too as a coloured poster. Now, of course, this is just type-based. It allows you to have big type and easy to read, but it's not as eye-catching as using graphics and pictures. And we all know a picture can paint 1,000 words, so it's important that you choose the right picture to tell the story you're trying to tell. So, first of all, we haven't got space for a picture in this layout, so we can reduce the headline to get a bit more space. We can take the call to action down, and then we can reduce the leading in the body copy, and we can also edit a little bit. So we're taking out those who need it most. It still makes sense to say making your community centre more accessible, and we've already said everyone's welcome, so we don't need to say children and dogs also. But this has presented a problem now, because suddenly we're a bit tight with the logo and it's all crashing to the end of the blue panel. Now, anyone who knows anything about carpentry will know that there's a rule about door hinges. And if you look at your door hinges, you will see that the top hinge is nearer to the top of the door than the bottom hinge is to the bottom of the door. It's like 6 inches and 9 inches or something like that. And the reason they do that is when you're standing up and you're looking at a door, the perspective foreshortening reduces the depth from the hinge to the bottom. If you put the hinge in exactly the same place, it would look wrong. And the same applies to graphic design. The space at the bottom should always be a little bit more than the space at the top. Now, I've been a bit sneaky here to try and make this work, because I can bring the blue panel down and I've allowed a white circle behind the logo to give it a nice clipped shape, which adds more interest to it. It answers the question about keeping the balance of the blue background, but it doesn't take up any more of our space. So, next thing is we want to use a picture. Now, many of you probably have clip art that came with your software or with your computers that you're free to use. And there are many websites where you can download free clip art to use. It's important that you choose one that is right for the story you want to tell, but it's also important to know that royalty-free images are not necessarily free, because all they're saying is you don't pay a royalty for using it, but you usually pay a license fee. And a lot of them will say free for personal use. Whether this is personal, I'm not sure. But if it says not to be used for commercial use, you're probably okay, because this isn't commercial. So anyway, so I've drawn the picture that we're going to use, which is a coffee cup. And we've added a cocoa sprinkling that resembles the logo for add a bit of visual interest. So it's quite simple, but it's telling the story and it's eye-catching. Now that you've created a well-balanced, attractive layout, you might think you're finished. But now's the time to get disruptive by using graphics and pullouts that break the rules you've established but add visual impact. So, for example, we're going to add a little flash here with the price. It's like a little stapled logo. Now, a lot of designers like to use stickers and logo and staples and things that look like they shouldn't be there because it encourages the reader to want to peel them off. And once you've got someone to react with it, you've already engaged them more than just letting them read it. A lot of direct marketing I used to do, you'd have a little leaflet and you'd have a coupon to fill in at the back, and we'd deliberately make it shorter than the page, so it's irritating. And it makes people want to tear it off, and you've already got them. Once you've got them to tear it off, you're already halfway there to getting them to respond to it. And it's that kind of trickery that we like to use. The other thing with design is, in the days when I used to have to draw things, you had to think about it and draw it. Nowadays, when you've got it on screen, you see things that you perhaps wouldn't have seen otherwise, things that attract your attention and think, oh, that's quite good, I'll use that. It's a little bit like the Rolling Stones in their mansion in France, recording a LP and spending weeks just twanging away, jamming, but until suddenly something clicks and they hear something that sounds quite good and it develops into a hit. It's a little bit like with design. You see something on the page and it makes you think, wow, that's really good. Now, you all know, I'm sure you've all done this, you highlight a bit of text and it changes the colour of the text and puts a black colour behind it, and it looks quite amazing. And that's exactly what we've done for the next pull out, which is just basically saying, with free slice of homemade cake. It's done with like as though it's a highlighted bit of text, and it jumps out and catches the eye. So here we have a complete colour poster with graphics and with an illustration that hopefully sell the event and get people to come along. So we'll give this one a tick as well. Okay. Now the bad bits. Oh no, not the bad bits, the good bits. Now, in my professional career, I've not done very many posters, but I've done a lot of posters for plays and drama productions. Now, the thing is with these kind of posters, they don't strictly use active headlines. They're using a passive headline because it's usually the title of the show. But given that the title of the show has usually been written to catch the eye and attract attention, it's already got an active component in it, and especially if it's something well known. Star Wars, for example, just tells you what it is, but it's got a lot of weight behind it because of its popularity and its original publicity that has driven that. So these are some examples of posters that I've done for our drama group that show some of these principles in action. So the first is, this is a play made famous by James Corden, and the poster was developed before we started rehearsals, and if you look at the date, you'll notice that it's October 2020. So this didn't happen. This was cancelled because of COVID, and this is the first time this has been seen in public. It's one of my favourite pieces, and I'd have loved to gone ahead. Now, what this is doing, it's showing you that you can use a mid-colour and use black and white text on it. Or in this case, it's a grey. But what it's doing is it's combining the headline with the graphic to make it more interesting. Now, if anybody knows the story of this, it's about a chap who agrees to do things for two different people, and he's basically got two bosses and he's been asked to do conflicting things. And what a key part of this play is the slapstick routine with the waiter. And this is kind of reflecting that, and sort of, it's telling the story, but it's not spoiling the story. And as you can see, the type is laid out in nice tight blocks, so you can navigate quite quickly to the information that you want. There are some legal requirements, which is the small print at the bottom, and we like to have the Broughton Astley thing at the top. But basically, it's just creating an interesting poster. The next one, this is to show that, this is more recent, this is to show that the headline doesn't have to be at the top. This is more of a picture with type on it than type with a picture. And the illustration evokes the period and feel of the play without giving anything away about the story. And again, nice navigatable blocks of type mean that you can go straight to the bit you want to take away. And the final bit, this is a play which, again, uses the headline with the graphic to make it more interesting. And there's also a bit of a joke and a tease in the fact that it's not a silver salver, it's actually a pith helmet. And we're using mid-colours, so you can have white and colour out of it. We're also using a white border, but we're breaking the rules because we're allowing the hand, sleeves and the hand to break out of that to create visual interest. So that's what I've done. I've done lots more, but those are the three that I sort of pulled out as my favourites. Now we get to what not to do. Now, I have to say at this point, there's far more good things to do than bad things to do. And so as not to shame and name anybody, I've done these myself, and it was very hard, because I'm so used to making things look good, it's difficult to try and make things look bad. So our first poster, this breaks a lot of rules. Just because you have a lot of typefaces that came with your software doesn't mean you have to use them all. You also need to use typefaces appropriately. So we've got a script face here for the headline. It's not in a helpful colour with the background, but they're not designed to be set out all in caps because they've all got flourishes, so that makes it even harder to read. And secondly, the text is too small and difficult to read, and if you look at the text, there's quite a few basic errors in the actual grammar of the type as well. For example, they've used a hyphen between made cake and all for just £1.50 rather than a nut rule, which is an N rule, which is longer. You see it all the time everywhere. It's one of my pet hates. And we've got 3 exclamation marks after £1.50. It might be a good price, but there really is no need for 3 exclamation marks. Also, what's going on here is capital letters for emphasis of words. Again, it's not grammatical and it's not particularly clever. It makes you look less than you are. So we've got a capital letter for tea and coffee and slice and money and accessible. It's not necessary. If you want to bring something out and give it some weight, set it in caps or change the colour in this case. So again, the rest of it is the same information that you've seen already. They've dropped the logo straight onto this background. This software supports transparency, so the background comes through. It looks interesting, but it probably breaks all the rules of the logo. If it was a professional logo, it would come with guidelines to say you can't do this because it's disrupting our brand. And then lovely typeface for the address, can't read it, completely wrong choice. It's a headline display typeface, and it really isn't helping. And then we've got a different one again for more information, which is hard to read. So this is particularly important to consider that not everybody who reads your posters, a lot of them might be, or many of them might be visually impaired, and we're not helping them by creating posters that are difficult to read. My eyesight's okay, and I struggle to read this. So because of that, we're going to give it but because it is so bad, we're going to give it another one. Now the next one, this is where they've used the same weight, or rather I've used the same weight of type and the same size for everything. So you have to read it all to pull out the information that you need. And given that this is a poster that people might be passing by, that's not very helpful. Now I said earlier about when you're designing things, you see something that excites you and makes you think, oh, that's a good idea, I might do something with that. Now, I have to say, when I was doing this, I used a slightly different typeface with a bit more interest for the main copy, and I actually thought, well, that's actually quite nice, all that big block of type. You could highlight bits in colours and make it quite impactful. So a lot of the things I'm saying don't do, I have to say I have done in the past for creative reasons, but I've done it well, hopefully, which is the difference. What I will say about this, though, is that it has got some positives. I quite like the coffee mug graphic. Not so sure about using lots of different cake pictures, different styles. You only need one picture to tell people there's cake, so a big one that makes it obvious is probably better than lots of little ones. And like I was saying about the logo previously, this one's been brought in thinking it was going to be transparent. It hasn't retained its transparency, it's just put white behind it, but we haven't bothered to actually make it a bit of space around it, make it so it's meant to be in the box. So for that reason, we get a cross. However, there are some good things. I like the graphic. I also like the fact that they've put paragraph spacing in, so they've still kept it within blocks of type, so it isn't so bad, and I think we actually will take it away, because I think that is okay, could be improved, but there's something about it that's quite nice. Our next one, This is one where is an example of writing too much copy and playing around with the type to make it all fit without any consistency, and consistency is the key to making it legible and memorable. So here we've got in the headline, they can't fit fundraising coffee morning in the same width as Flowey Village Hall, so we've condensed it. Doesn't look right, it's not nice at all. We've also used a photo of a cup, but we've used it too small, and I think it's probably not at the right resolution. So in print form, it will look jaggy and blurred. It looks okay on the screen because your screen resolution is probably a third of your print resolution needs to be. So if you're using graphics, you need to make sure that they are at 300 pixels per inch at the size you are using them. If you enlarge them, that pixel number goes down. So what else we've got here? Just because you've got the full width of the page to put the type in doesn't mean you have to use it all. Small margins are things you see in free advertising, things that are trying to cram as much in as they can. When I used to do retail advertising, when I used to do recruitment advertising, you had two choices. You cram it all in the smallest space and pay as little as you can, or you buy more space and have a bit of white space around it to make it more interesting. And you know which ones worked? The ones with the space around them. So also, it's quite wordy. There's a lot of information there that really isn't necessary. It breaks a few typesetting rules, like having community on its own line, never creating a widow. You need to take 2 words or 3 words around to make it look good. And also, when you've got a list of type, it's very... You see this in sports programs where they've got a long sportsman and they can't fit his name in the same space as everybody else, and they condense it to make it fit. It's not very clever. And you certainly shouldn't do it on a poster. So here where you've got Madeira cake, we've squashed it to try and make it fit. It just makes it hard to read. Do it in 2 lines or change the copy to make it fit. So also here we've dropped the logo onto a coloured background. There is a single colour logo. It doesn't look too bad. But again, if that's allowed, that's great. If it's not allowed, it's not great. So we give this one across. So finally, this is another poster, and this is it shows you pixelated graphics. What happens if you use them at the wrong size? You get all jagged shapes on them and blurry. But it's also showing that we're using nice, attractive graphics to add a bit of impact, and then we're putting the type straight across it and you can't read it. So you should avoid putting type across complicated photos, backgrounds or graphics, because it stops you being able to read it. And again, the headline is across the photo, but it's across the main part of the photo, which doesn't help legibility. If you're going to use a headline on a photo, find a bit of space in the photo that is quite plain, like the sky or a wall or something, and use that to put your type on. It also doesn't show you very well, but that is a very low res, very low compressed JPEG, so it's a sort of compression of 3 or something, which even at the right resolution looks horrible in print. So you should try and avoid using very compressed JPEGs. Again, the logo's just dropped on the background. It's doing things, but you can't really recognise it for what it is. So again, that gives us a cross because we don't like that. So those are the basic things not to do and the things to do. And I could go on for hours about all the intricacies of typesetting etiquette and things that a lot of modern designers don't get right because they've never had to buy typesetting, so they've never had to specify it, they've just typed it in. So good hint is don't let your software drive what you're doing. Don't let the width of the text boxes dictate where the line breaks are. Do it yourself. Make sure that you have it in a way that you like. And that's it. So if you've got any other questions, I think I've covered everything.
Sorry, John. Yeah, one of the things that I've been thinking is there a minimum font size for disability purposes and things like that? Because that was something years ago that used to be a minimum of 12. Is that still?
Well, the difficulty with font size is they don't necessarily relate to the size of type. Because in the old days, you have hot metal type, and the font size was the size of the metal, and the type could be big in that size of metal or small in that size of metal. So it's very difficult to say, oh, set it at 14 point or 12 point, because different fonts will look different sizes. So that's the first thing to say. I think you have to create a balance, because you have to think about your readers and make sure that you set type in a size that is appropriate for them. I don't think there's any particular rules. If you go too big, it doesn't look very nice and it looks a bit clumsy. So you just need to bear in mind to make things that think of what your mum can read, I suppose. Is probably a good way of doing it. Certainly, as I've got older and needed glasses and things, I'm a lot more aware of small type, and I would try not to use anything too small. So body copy, I wouldn't go below 9 point really. And if you know that your audience is likely to have reading problems, then you need to allow for that.
Thanks for that. I'm an American. We have different capitalization rules, and so I get confused over here when I'm doing titles and things like that, and I'm constantly making them big and small and getting lost. And I wonder if there's a rule.
Right. Well, any designer has their own set of rules. They've come across problematic typesetting all the time, and there are various ways around it. For example, if you have a headline that has a ... on the end and you centre it, it looks wrong because it's not in the middle and you have to adjust it to make it visually. So as far as there are a lot of differences between American and English grammar, and as far as there is the sort of cases, you can have capitals, you can have lowercase, something that we call sentence case, which makes it different from what is often known as title case, where every word is capitalised at the beginning. It doesn't look right when you've got lots of small words like of and it, and you see a mixture. People like capitalise the most important bits, and they don't capitalise the or of. I personally tend to stick to sentence case because I don't like the fact that you've got a mixture. But it's what looks right, really, and what you're happy with from a grammar point of view, really. It's acceptable in headlines, but I wouldn't use it anywhere else. But you also do, I mentioned earlier, the using an N rule as a dash in punctuation. I think in America they use an M rule and don't have any space around it. We do that in this country as well sometimes. There's different grammatical things. For example, if you've got a list of things, in the UK we don't put a comma after the last one when you have and something, but in America I think they do. There's various different conventions like that.
Not long ago I've done a publicity poster for an event, and it was bilingual. It was bilingual. It was in 2 languages.
Oh yes, bilingual.
How would you approach doing a bilingual publicity poster?
I'd have to think about that. I know that when I was doing Adobe's work in 8 languages, for technical reasons we did everything in a black plate, so the colour work couldn't change between languages, and the pain it was to get German to fit anything because it's so long compared with English was quite a nightmare. I'd have to think about, I think you'd probably just try and repeat things. You just have to design it in a way where you can say the same thing twice. Maybe use a different colour for the different language.
I did that, but it looks too wordy.
Yeah, I can
if you know what I
imagine
mean.
that. The answer is I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I've never done it before. So.
I'll show you your email address with John and get back to me.
Yeah, I've got it on my laptop with me, so you can have a look.
Is there?
Give me an appraisal.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the other thing you could do, you could maybe make a landscape poster and have English and the different nationality next to it.
Great. Yeah, the next question.
I noticed all your visual aids today, all your posters were portrait. Any time that a landscape comes in useful, and because business cards are usually landscape.
Yeah. Well,
just wondering, you know, the reason why it's portrait.
That's a very good question. We are about to start work on the girl on the train in our drama group, and because of the nature of trying to get the train motion, I thought about, well, we could do a landscape poster because it gives you the girl on the train is a long line, you can have it whizzing by like a train. Why not? So I say if you wanted to do a landscape, fine.
So
No, there's no rule. You might find it easier to pin up a A4 one if everyone else is A4, but no, there's no rules. We do a lot of square programmes for the theatre just because they're an interesting shape. In fact, it's a good idea to give your poster a bit more impact because people will notice it more than an A4 one. So it's a good idea.
But thanks so much for coming. Thanks again to Jog. I'm going to be packing all of this away with Pete. But yeah, please do spend some time, come and say hi, introduce yourselves to Michelle and to each other and to Jog. And I think you've got business cards and stuff as well. So yeah, thanks ever so much and yeah, enjoy lunch. Thanks.